Americans in shock as grocery store shelves are increasingly empty.
New this morning, we are getting a new look at prices at the grocery store. July Consumer Price Index shows inflation for food prices over the past month.
Canada is looking to expand its trading relationships beyond the U.S.
You sit down to make dinner and you realize that you can't. Bread costs 18% more than it did just a few weeks ago. Meat is nearly twice the price that it was in January. That same $120 shopping trip that you always counted on, now it barely lasts 3 days before the fridge looks empty again. Why? Because Canada, the country that once supplied nearly half of the food on Americans' tables, just turned off the tap. Instead, every shipment of wheat, meat, and produce is heading straight to Europe, where buyers pay more and they guarantee long-term deals. Parents are already skipping meals so that their kids can eat. Schools are rationing lunches, and if this keeps going on, ladies and gentlemen, even the basics will vanish. Watch until the end, because the next shortage, it isn't optional. It's survival. The wheat fields go dark. Sarah Mitchell walks the same wheat fields in Sakawian with her grandfather planted 60 years ago. But the trucks rolling past her farm and now carry German flags instead of American ones. Her grain, the same grain that once filled bread baskets from Seattle to Miami, now crosses the Atlantic before Americans even know it's harvested. The numbers tell a stark story. Canada exported $2.8 billion worth of wheat to the United States last year. This morning, that flow stopped. European mills now pay 30% above American prices, and Canadian farmers cannot ignore the math. When the margin determines whether your plant is actually going to be planted next season, then loyalty becomes a luxury that unfortunately you just can't afford. The domino, it starts here in fields that you've never seen, growing grains that you've never even thought about, but it lands on your kitchen table. Bread prices jumped 18% in the past month. Pasta costs 24% more than it did at the time of Christmas. Every bakery from Boston to Birmingham now rations flour like we're currently in wartime. Maria Santos, who runs a Santos bakery in Phoenix, used to order 600 Owalibi of flour each week. Her supplier called yesterday, and now she gets $150 if she's lucky. "I've been making bread for 22 years, she said, staring at a half-empty shelf where dinner rolls should be. "I've never told customers that I can't feed their families. The protein pipeline breaks. The refrigerated trucks that once carried Canadian beef and pork across the border now heads east to Hamburg and Rotterdam. What took 3 hours to reach Detroit supermarkets now takes 3 days to reach European ports, and American families pay the price because of that redirection. Here's the mechanism that's reshaping every meats counter in America. Canada supplied 42% of imported beef and 61% of imported pork consumed by American families. The European Union offered guaranteed contracts worth $4.7 billion for Canadian protein over the next 5 years. No haggling, no seasonal price drops, no uncertainty. For ranchers like Tom Bradley in Alberta, the choice was simple mathematics. American buyers want to negotiate every shipment, he explains, watching cattle trucks head towards Halifax instead of Fargo. Europeans write one check and take everything that I produce. Which would you choose if you were in my situation? The consequence ripples through every American grocery store within weeks. Ground beef that costs $449 per pound in January now finds itself being sold for $7.33 when stores stock it at all. Pork shoulder jumped from $2.99 to $518. Jennifer Walsh shops for her family of 4 in Cleveland, Ohio. She used to spend $120 on groceries each week. Last Tuesday, she spent $97 and came home with 3 days' worth of food. My kids ask, why we can't have hamburgers anymore? She says, how do you explain to your 7-year-old that other countries can afford to feed their children better than we currently can? The meat shortage creates a cascade that touches every single aisle. When families can't afford protein, they buy more carbohydrates. And when carbohydrate supplies are already strained from the wheat crisis, then that means that prices spike across the board. And suddenly, every single meal becomes what's being called a budget crisis. Fresh food becomes a luxury. The greenhouse complexes in Ontario that once shipped fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, and lettuce to American supermarkets now glow with grow lights destined for London and Paris. What filled produce sections from Maine to California now crosses an ocean while American families watch familiar vegetables disappear from their diets. Canadian greenhouse production supplied 38% of fresh vegetables consumed by Americans during winter months. The European deal guarantees purchase of 85% of Canadian greenhouse output for the next decade at premium prices. European consumers pay what Americans won't, and Canadian growers follow where the money is. The impact shows immediately in every produce aisle. Tomatoes that cost $1.79 per pound in December now sells for $412 when you can actually find them. Cucumbers jumped from 99 to 247 each. Leafy greens that anchored every American salad now cost more than most families spend on entire meals. Patricia Chen manages produce purchasing for a regional grocery chain spanning Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. She used to negotiate seasonal contracts with Canadian suppliers each fall, guaranteeing fresh vegetables through winter and early spring. This year, her calls go unanswered or end with polite rejections. They're not even taking meetings. She reports the Europeans signed multi-year deals that pay 60 to 70% above what we could offer. The shortage creates a cascade that reaches beyond dinner plates. Schools that serve 800 million meals annually to American children. Suddenly they face impossible choices. The National School Lunch Program, which feeds 30 million children daily, cannot source affordable fresh vegetables for balanced meals mandated by the federal nutrition standards. Rebecca Thompson coordinates food service for a school district in rural Tennessee that serves 4,200 students. Half quality for free or reduced price meals. Families that depend on school breakfasts and lunch for their basic nutrition. We're serving canned vegetables for emergency stockpiles that expire next month, she explains. When those run out, I don't know how we'll meet the nutritional requirements, she said. Sugar vanishes, prices explode. Canadian maple syrup once flowed south to sweeten American pancakes and flavor everything from ice cream to barbecue sauces. Now it flows east to European luxury markets that pay 4 times what American food manufacturers could afford. The great maple syrup redirection doesn't change breakfast. It transforms the economics of sweetness itself. Canada produces 71% of global maple syrup supply. The European Union inked an exclusive purchasing agreement worth $850 million annually for Canadian maple products. American buyers accustomed to negotiating seasonal prices suddenly face a reality where maple syrup costs more per gallon than premium gasoline. The ripple effects extend far beyond Sunday morning pancakes. Food manufacturers who relied on a maple syrup to differentiate premium products now scramble for alternatives that don't exist at scale. Ice cream makers, candy producers, and artisanal food companies that built their brand around authentic maple flavors watch their supply chains dissolve overnight. But the maple crisis reveals a deeper problem. When one sweetener disappears, demand shifts to every remaining option. Sugar prices jump up 29% as manufacturers substitute ingredients. Corn syrup costs climb by 34% as desperate buyers bid against each other, and even artificial sweeteners see double-digit prices increase as panic buying spreads through the food industry. Lisa Park, who runs a small bakery in Portland, Oregon, that builds its reputation on maple glazed donuts and maple cream pastries. Her supplies delivered the bad news in a 5-minute phone call. No more maple syrup, no estimated return date, no alternative at comparable prices. 30 years building a business around recipes that customers love. She says staring at equipment that might never run again. How do you replace the flavor that made your reputation? Energy costs strangle food transport. The diesel fuel that powers every truck carrying food across America now flows to European buyers who pay 60% above domestic prices. Canadian refineries that once prioritized American supply chains now serve contracts worth $2.3 billion annually to fuel European transportation networks. The result, food might exist, but moving it becomes prohibitively more expensive. Here's how energy shortages amplify the food crisis. Transportation accounts for 11% of food costs under normal conditions. When diesel prices jump from $340 per gallon to $618 per gallon, then trucking companies pass those costs directly to consumers. Every mile between farm and supermarket now costs nearly double the price. Marcus Rodriguez drives an 18-wheeler that delivers fresh produce from California's Central Valley to supermarkets that are across Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. His routes cover one $200 Memeter round trip, consuming roughly 400 gallons of diesel fuel. At old prices, fuel costs showing $368 per trip. At current prices, that same trip costs $2,172, more than many loads are worth. I'm not driving charity routes, he explains. If the math doesn't work, the food doesn't move. The transportation crisis creates a vicious cycle that amplifies every other shortage. Canadian food might be available, but American truckers cannot afford to transport it. Domestic food production continues, but regional distribution networks collapse under fuel costs that exceed profit margins. Food, it exists, but it cannot reach the consumer at prices that they can actually pay. Supermarket chains respond by rationing transportation to only the highest margin products. Fresh produce, which spoils quickly and earns thin profits, disappears first. Processed foods with longer shelf lives and higher markups claim remaining truck space. Families watch balanced diets become luxury options, while empty shelves fill only with expensive, highly processed alternatives. Processing plants go silent. The Canadian electricity that powered food processing plants across the northern United States now energizes European manufacturing instead. Hydroelectric power from Quebec that once ran 24-hour operations in Vermont, New York, and New England now crosses the Atlantic as renewable energy credits worth $1.88 billion annually to European buyers committed to carbon neutrality. This cuts deeper than simple power shortages. Food processing requires consistent, reliable electricity to maintain cold storage, run production lines, and preserve perishable inventory. When Canadian utilities prioritize European contracts that pay double the American rates, U.S. processing plants face impossible choices: pay unsustainable electricity costs or shut down operations. David Kim manages a frozen vegetable processing plant in upstate New York that employs 347 workers and processes crops from 6,000 acres of regional farmland. European utilities offered Canadian power companies 60% above American rates for long-term renewable energy contracts. His electricity costs have tripled overnight, making operations economically impossible. We're not just closing a factory, he explains, watching the last shift clock out. We're breaking the line between the farms and the families for everything grown within 50 miles of here. The processing plant closure creates a cascading shortages that multiply food scarcity. Raw vegetables that cannot be processed spoils in the fields. Farmers who invested in crops expecting processing contracts now watch harvest rot, while supermarket shelves sit empty. The infrastructure that transformed local agriculture into affordable food for distant families simply stops functioning. The banking system chooses sides. Canadian banks that financed American food imports for decades now redirects credit lines to European buyers offering guaranteed returns backed by government subsidies. The $10 billion European Food Security Initiative doesn't just buy Canadian exports. It provides financial guarantees that make American buyers look like unacceptable. Here's how this makes food shortage permanent. International food trade runs on letters of credit that guarantee payment regardless of delivery delays, quality issues, or currency fluctuations. European buyers offer these letters of credit backed by sovereign debt ratings and multi-year government commitments. American food importers offer letters of credit backed by corporate credit ratings that fluctuate with quarterly earnings. From a banker's perspective, the choice requires no analysis. European food security programs guarantee payment through government agencies with ARA credit ratings. The American food importers depend on private companies whose creditworthiness changes with market conditions. When you're financing billions of dollars in perishable goods across international borders, you choose the guarantee that never fails. Margaret Foster coordinates international purchasing for a food distribution company that supplies 12,000 restaurants across the southeastern United States. Her credit lines with Canadian banks financed imports worth $450 million annually. Everything from specialty grains to frozen seafood that enabled restaurants to offer diverse menus at affordable prices. Last month, all her credit lines were canceled with 30 days' notice. They told us European buyers offer better terms and government backing. She reported this. We're not just losing suppliers, we're losing the ability to pay for food even when it's available. The banking crisis creates the final domino that transforms temporary shortages into permanent food insecurity. Even when Canadian producers went to sell to American buyers, financial institutions refused to finance transactions without American-level guarantees that American businesses just cannot provide. The implications extend far beyond grocery stores to every institution that feeds Americans. Hospitals that serve 3 million meals daily to patients and staff suddenly cannot source ingredients that therapeutic diets require. Military bases that feed 2 million service members lose access to suppliers that met strict nutritional and security standards. That's where we are. Bread prices exploding, shelves are half empty, and families wondering what disappears next. It's not a future problem. It's already happening in stores across America. But I want to hear from you. What are you seeing in your local grocery store aisles? Are prices jumping this fast where you live? Drop a comment down below and let's compare notes. Your story might help someone else prepare. And if this breakdown opened your eyes, then do me a favor. Hit that like, tap the subscribe, and ring that bell so that you don't miss out on the next chapter. And the next shortage that we uncover could be the one that changes your dinner table tomorrow.